started. So welcome everyone. My name is Jen Brown. I am the Training and Education Manager here at Renew US. And I am delighted to introduce Io, who will be your guide through all mail things tonight. I want to say that you're in for a treat because Io is a mail guru in all of the ways. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Io.
Hello, everybody. My name is Io Shoba. I am a digital mail production manager at an office based out of Chicago called Dover. I am here to give you all a introduction to starting up a mail program and a few insights into some things that you should consider. So I titled this presentation, So You Want to Start a Mail Program. So first of all, I just want to go over why should you invest in campaign mail? When people are pivoting towards things like digital ads, expanding their field programs, and investing more in TV budgets, why should you choose something like mail choose something like mail when all those options are so tantalizing? Because at the end of the day, people always think to themselves, isn't mail for old people? So the reasons why you should choose mail are you have a great return on investment when compared to television. And there's two reasons for that. The first reason is that mail is very personalized. You can target your messages to your audience specifically. And when you use mail, you do not have waste with your list. So when you use things like television and radio, radio waste and television does not stay within your district. So you will get some people who are out of your district who cannot vote for you, who will be part of your spend. So the other reason why is mail is a most trusted method of communication among older voters, and it is especially cost effective in areas with very expensive media markets, like you would see in New York City or Chicago or Los Angeles, California in general, and where I live in Washington, D.C. So you don't want to take my word for it. You can take it straight from the U.S. Postal Service, which is no matter what, I know the circumstances, but they're not biased. They're a government institution. They like the mail anyway. So as you can see, one of the important portions of paid communication is sequencing, making sure that all of your programs are running together to amplify the message. So this means that you want to start sending mail not like a week before the election, not 2 weeks before the election. You want to start sending mail early and stay up through the election so people can see your mail and it can reinforce the messages that they're receiving at their doors and on their television sets and radios and online. So this is just some statistics that the United States Postal Service provided me with, showing the results of a survey taken after the 2021 elections in Virginia to show how people viewed their mail and how much they trusted it. So you'll be able to look at this afterwards, either through the video or through a link to this PowerPoint presentation. And I have a couple of additional slides to show that having these personalized messages was very effective among both men and women voters, among most races of voters, and between young voters, older voters. So you can see it's like mail is a very valued method of communication, up there with television, even more trusted than email and radio. Fine. And again, more just a summary of what I said, that mail reinforces other paid media efforts and direct contact made through canvases, phone banks, and events. You don't get any waste when you use mail because you can target your mail universe to whoever you want to be speaking to. Another benefit is that even if, people say, oh, this is junk mail, by the time they pick it up, read through it, and then decide to throw it away, they've seen your headline, they've seen the candidate's face and a little bit of their message. And it allows you to deliver that personalized message arc to those people. Next slide. So I've convinced you that mail is a good investment. So before you begin a mail program, there are a few things that you need to take stock of and take account of to make sure you have the correct capacity to build your mail program and a foundation from which to start. So a couple of those questions you'll need to ask yourself is, what's your budget? How much are you going to be able to spend for your mail program, and will you be able to make this last? For mail programs, is especially important because once you go up, once your mail starts going out the door, it is very hard to change your universe size. You have to essentially re-pull a list, reprocess it, and then send it out again. And this could take more than a week, depending on how busy the whatever printing house you're using is. So if you decide that, oops, we don't have any, if you decide that 1 week, oops, we don't have enough money, we want to cut down the number of mailings next week, unfortunately, that will probably not be possible. So you have to really plan ahead when you're creating a mail program. Another thing you want to take account of is who you'll be talking to. What will your targeted list look like? This is essentially when you go to pull a list from, whether that be the U.S. Postal Service or Catalyst or Van or whatever database that you're using to look at targeted voters. This is who you'll be picking out. So the one thing I always try to caution people here is you don't want to make your universe too small. You shouldn't be targeting people, say, who have Pomeranians in your district. That's very specific, and it will be very expensive. At the same time, you do not want to make a universe too large because you're going to end up wasting a lot of money that you don't need to. So if, for example, you're running in a district that has a school board election, and you see that for the past 5 elections, maybe 7,000 people have come out, there's no need to mail 50,000 people in your district to get them to vote. Another question you'll want to answer for yourself is, do you have the capacity to handle a mail program? And if not, how do we build it? So that includes things like having the time to devote towards creating mail and sending it through an approval process, time to concept it, and time to for the candidate to look at it and have the ability to the campaign manager to have the ability to make sure that it's fitting in with all of your other modes of communication. So last thing you'll want to answer yourself is, how often will you be dropping mail? Now, it seems like a simple question, but this in itself is a very strategic choice. Sometimes you will decide that you want to drop once a week. Sometimes you'll decide that you want to drop twice a week. And if it's GOTV time, you might decide that you need to drop 3 times a week at some point in your mail program. This is something that takes a lot of consideration about both your needs for the campaign, where you think you're at based on either polling or whatever method you're using to keep track of how you're doing in the district, and other considerations such as cost and price effectiveness. And the last question you need to answer before you begin is, who the heck is printing all of this anyway? Slide. So in this presentation, I'm just going to be going over building capacity, creating a budget, scheduling your mail to go out, and other odds and ends you may need before starting a mail program. So the the components of your mail budget are the cost to print each piece, the postage amount, the cost for any design work or stock photos that you may use on a mailer, and the shipping amount. And importantly, how many rounds of mail you're going to be doing. So some additional costs you'll incur is if you choose to do a photo shoot, and when you send your list, you'll get processed by a mail printing house. The photo shoot, I'll lend you a little tip. You want to get all of your photo shoots done on the same day. So if you're going to do your mail photo shoot, I would suggest that you invite either someone with a digital camera over to do video for digital ads, and maybe someone with a camera to do video for television shoots on the same day, if possible, if your budget allows it, because it just cuts down on the headache. Your candidate will be wearing the same, will have similar themes throughout his mailers, so you don't have to go out and rebooking photos in the elementary school, for example, or if you have to go to a union shop to show that you have support of labor unions, you don't have to arrange that again and again, and you'll have consistency throughout all your modes of communication. And processing a mail list is just you finding out your exact shipping amount and the exact postage amount. Just so you know, the more people you mail, the more your shipping costs will go up. Usually, if you're not mailing like 100,000 people, it will be between like $200 and like $500 per round of mail. So moving on to the next slide. So we're going on, and we're going to, if you want to go and find a printing and mailing house, you're going to want to look for a union printer. So if I can open this up. So when you go to this, if you click on this link, it will take you to a the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, I believe, and you can search for your state or your city or wherever to find a union print print house. One of the things that I'm going to advise is that you just don't go with whoever's in your state or whoever you see first. What your best option will be is to take maybe 5, 6, at most maybe 8 printers and have conversations with them to compare their rates, assess their capacity to work with you that cycle, and see what sizes they offer. So when you have that conversation with that printer, there are a couple of things that you want to ask. So in my experience, it's been best to pick up the phone and give them a call and ask them a few questions. So usually the things that I want to confirm is that they are in fact still a union printer, because it's possible that anything can happen. They might be listed on that database and they've been removed somehow, either through losing the union contract. I haven't had it happen to me, but it's always good to double check. You want to ask them if they have the capacity to print your mail for this election cycle. So printers, especially big ones, handle a lot of clients from election cycle to election cycle. They have a limited amount, they probably have a limited amount of printers, they have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of ability to get things turned around. And especially one of the things that they have to consider is the amount of paper that they'll have in stock. So you want to make sure that when you're talking to them, you can give them a universe size and how many rounds of mail you're printing, so they can let you know if they have the capacity to actually print your mail for that election cycle. So another question that is usually good to ask is if they can handle shipping in-house. So one thing that's important to note is that you can very technically ship your mail yourself. However, if you choose to do that, that means that you will have to apply labels to all of your mailers. You will have to go and put them in the post office box yourself. If you do not know how to put a red label on your mailers and know to request it, that is something that may cause your mailers to arrive late. And there are a bunch of other trade-offs for it. So if you do want to save that expense each time you choose to mail, you can do that, but a lot of print shops will allow you to request that they handle shipping in-house, which means that they will package the mail for you, and they'll send it out without you having to having you and your volunteers to sit there and stamp through each individual mail piece. So the last thing you'll want to ask them is once you've been assured that they can handle all these capacity needs, is if they can provide price quotes for how much it costs to print each size of a mailer and how much the postage will cost, which is the mailing cost for different sizes of mail, and like in a follow-up email, so you have a written record of it. So math for paper can get kind of complicated, and that becomes its own issue. So suffice to say, usually pick like a couple of sizes. In my experience, I usually work with either 6x11 mailers, 8.5 by 11 mailers, or 8.5 by 22 mailers that fold once. You can go for larger size mailers or ask for a 2-fold mailer, which would be like a 3-panel trifold. But it's important to think about what a person will be getting out of their mailbox, and making sure that you don't send them essentially a pamphlet every time you want to mail them. So when it's your first time, it is a good idea to ask them to break down some of the more complicated aspects of it. So things like whether you'll use text or cover paper, which is cover paper is essentially much thicker paper. It's can go from just a little bit like cardstock all the way to almost as thick as like a piece of cardboard. And text is much thinner, which is what you would normally get like with most like printed pieces of paper that you would like find in like your average printer. But that is its own beast, and I suggest that when you go, you can ask them to, for example, send you like a sample of different sizes of mail, so you can determine for yourself which one you think you'll want. So now that you have some price quotes and your universe size, you can think now about mocking up a budget. So a few things to keep in mind before you begin making a budget are: you do not want to have gaps in your mail program. I said this before, and I'm saying it again because it's very important. I've seen how having gaps can cause a message to be lost. So I want to reiterate that once you go up with mail and you're hitting people's mailboxes, you do not want interruptions in that process. So that means that even if you decide you not like a piece, you have to find a way to fill that gap so that mail is coming at a regular interval so people can expect it and they can still get a smooth messaging arc. So as I said, that's why I said you want to make sure you have a budget, and that's why you want to plan out ahead of time and make sure that you have the money necessary to send each piece of mail. I would say 2 weeks before it has to be sent out. So once you have your mail universe set, it's hard to change it, like I said, and you will have need to estimate amounts for shipping and postage when you're creating this initial mock-up of a budget. So this is essentially what I use as like a timeline for getting mail printed and sent to people's mailboxes. So you'll notice that it has a bunch of different categories. So I will try to break these down for you to give you some information on what you should be thinking of and what steps of the process you should be looking at when you're creating your mail budget. So the first thing is the universe size. As I said, it's important to make sure that your universe is appropriate for your election, and making sure that the list that you're giving is householded, that you have processed this universe against the Postal Service's change of address, all the things that I think Van does for you if you go through and pull a list from there. But if you get it from elsewhere, make sure when you send it to the make sure that when you have this list, you have this preliminary list, you send it to your mail house first and ask them to process this list to either take people's names off and to check people's names against things like to see if they're deceased or if they've moved, to make sure that you have a proper list. So like I said, the universe is very important. Just make sure that you're not getting hyper specific. When you're able to target like this, I know it's very tempting to get into hyper targeting individuals down to like maybe a couple of thousand or maybe a couple hundred, depending on your race, like which race you're running in, whether it be a school board or state house. But I want to caution against this impulse, just because if you go and pull out even smaller and smaller groups of people, you have to think about how many people are going to see this mailer. How cost effective will that be? Because the smaller the universe that you run, the more each individual mailer costs. With bigger universes, the cost comes down a little bit. So you have to really balance what you're looking for versus your election. So the other portion is the size of the mailer. So different sizes of mailers will have different costs based on different costs for their postage and costs for printing them, and they will allow you to put more or less information in them. So the larger your mailer, the more information you can put in it. But keep in mind, you also don't want to bury people with too much information. You want to give them essentially what they need to know for your messaging arc, and you want to think about what information you're leaving them with. With smaller mailers, they are less expensive. The smaller your mail gets, the less expensive it gets, but the less information you put on it. There are also some other additional benefits to using some small mail pieces. There are a few benefits you can get from the post office as well, such as they will send like a notification or an email to your phone to give you a preview of the mailer, and they'll send that to everyone in that house. So it can be very effective at getting more value for the mail that you're sending out. So the other thing that you have to consider that's going to be part of your budget that you have to estimate for is the printing cost. Printing costs, depending on how much paper is available, can change. So when you want to go and print something, you want to ask them for the printing cost and want to make sure they'll be able to either give you a notification on whether printing costs will change in between mailers, or if they I got some notifications in the chat I just noticed. I'll answer some of these when I get to the end of this budget section. So the printing costs can change, and it's important to understand that to try and plan ahead for that, so you don't end up in a place where you can't pay for a mailer. It doesn't happen often. It's happened this year because of paper shortages. So that's just something I want to point out to you to keep in mind. As I said, the larger the mail piece, the higher it will cost to print each individual one. And also, the more mail you print, right? So the larger your universe size, the lower the printing cost will be for each individual mailer. There's a reason for that, but for your purposes, it's not really that important to know. So also have to keep in mind the postage, which is essentially all those like pretty stamps that you have to put on mailers for them to go out. So depending on whether you are working with a state campaign committee, or if you have set up a nonprofit organization that you're working with, you can get this as either pre-sort standard, which is more expensive, or nonprofit, which is less expensive. It will depend on these types of things will depend on if you're paying for it, if the state party is paying for it, or if you have like a different kind of organization that's doing these types of things. The postage amount is something that you'll find out when you go to process your list. They will tell you what your postage amount is, but you can kind of take a guess if you ask them to give you like an estimate for postage. Oops. And this is me. This print rate and postage rate is what I just went over. So some other things just to consider are how many, like some stock photos you're using, if you have to pay for each an individual one, or if you use any photos that you have to pay for, or anything that's special that you have to use that's used on individual mailer. Those are essentially one-time costs. So that would be like a photo shoot, or buying a list from, I don't know, maybe a credit card company or something. And this is like when you add those to the mail plan, this is what the total cost will be. So I'm going to take a quick second here because I am talking kind of quickly to answer some of these questions. So is there any data about the effectiveness of handwritten postcards versus crisp professional mailers? I don't have any, I haven't seen any studies that compare the effectiveness of handwritten versus professionally designed mailers. I'd have to see if I could find anything, maybe from like the I think it's the Data Analysis Institute, to see if there's any research that's been done there. My opinion is that, this is only opinion, I don't have anything to back it up. My opinion is that they kind of have different purposes. I think that handwritten postcards are more used for GOTV in general, right? That they have a better effect at trying to like motivate someone to take action. For these types of mailers that go into the printing house and then going out. These are usually used for things like either persuasion or giving people like information. So they're very effective at that. They can give people a persuasive message over a series of mailings over the course of a few weeks that I'm not sure handwritten messages would be. Oh, analyst group. Handwritten messages would be as effective as doing. So, for example, if you wanted to say have a 9-piece mail program series, which consisted of three positives about pieces about your candidate, 3 negative pieces about your opponent, and then 3 pieces where you contrast your opponent to your candidate. I think that becomes a little bit more effective when you're using professionally done mailers than when you're sending handwritten notes, because there is a visual element to go along with that, so you can see your candidate, your candidate, the opponent in a negative light, and associate their face with some negative, either with their negative voting record or some of the negative things they said, or some of their beliefs, that would be detrimental in a depending on the electorate. You can do things like you can have endorsements added to your mailers. So, for example, if you go out and you work really hard and you get like a Planned Parenthood endorsement, you can use that on your the mail pieces that you're sending out. Or if you get an endorsement from like AFSCME or something like that, you can also use that on your mailer so people can see who you're involved with and associate like your face, your candidate's face, or your organization with certain principles and such. So that was a very long tangent, but that was just me trying to compare and contrast what you get from handwritten notes versus what you can get from a professional mailer. See, weighing the local versus printer, union printer. I promised local in my donation request. And while I know my supporters are pro-union, the closest union print shop is almost 100 miles away. Ooh, that's tough. So you went in and you looked up your state or your county and only saw a union print shop 100 miles away.
We actually, as the Cheshire County Democrats, we did
Yeah.
all of our stuff through local printing shops, which is great. I'm so happy we did that, which my door hangers and all that are through local, are through union printer shops.
Yeah.
The thing is that for my own campaign, when I had requested donations, I said, all of the money that's being donated is going to be spent locally, and we don't have any local print shops. So
Tough one.
we're New Hampshire, we're rural,
Yeah. I mean, I'm even thinking about like what print shops I've used. And usually when I do New England stuff, I use a printer in like Massachusetts, which isn't helpful for your case. So, that one's a tough consideration. I'd say if it's something that you've promised to your constituents, they can, if they care a lot, they can go and see to your campaign expenditure page and see who you've been paying. So if it's a promise that you absolutely positively have to keep, I would say go for it. I will say that one of the things that I've done in the past when I had a Georgia election where the candidate made a similar promise was that we did all of our collateral things like door hangers, flyers, all of that with local print shops. And then for the actual mailers, the only people who had capacity to send that many mailings was essentially a printer that was not in that state. I will say though that if your universe size is small, if your universe size is small enough that they can handle like the amount of mailing you're sending out, say it's like 5,000. Well, again, it'll depend on like what their capacity is, but if it's small enough, I suppose it won't be an enormous issue if you didn't promise like the union thing. Yeah. I can attest to the stamping 5,000 envelopes on my first campaign. It took us about a week of nonstop stuffing envelopes and putting stamps on them to get them like ready to send out. And it was a pain, and it was the only thing I did for a good 5 days. So that's why I said it's a consideration. It's a consideration that if you want to save the money, you're gonna want to have a lot of volunteers ready, because it's going to take up a bunch of people's time for a long time, especially when you have those larger universes. When you have like maybe 10,000 people or 12,000 people, it can become a huge pain in the behind. So stack for automation idea on handwritten notes if folks want to hear it.
Yeah. So I don't know if folks have like a digital paper cutter, like a Cameo or anything like that. They're fairly affordable. I've been using them with a pen tool attachment to make postcards that look like they're handwritten. We actually do little sketch art on it. And we've actually gone and visited homes where people are like, oh my God, I got your mailer. And they kept the postcard up on the refrigerator because of the little art on there was kind of cool. Like, I don't know if you guys can see it, but like, here's an example where it's just a blue ink pen drawing of a bird in a cage kind of thing. And you can do it based on whatever your theme is, right? And we just use basic 8.5 by 11 cardstock, stick it on this thing. We, the software designs it, and then we use the pen tool to draw on it, and then we use a cutting tool to cut it out to the postcard shape and size that we want. I haven't found a way to like integrate it with a database so that we could custom each name and address. Still working on that. But we've been able to do 1,000 postcards that way fairly robustly and quickly. And then we have the volunteers do the stamp and mail part of it. So that's a Cameo from Silhouette, but they have other kinds. Cricut, CRICUT. There's just any Michael's craft store, this kind of thing that people use for scrapbooking and things like that. And it's really versatile. We design campaign stickers and stuff. We have a sticker sheet that we give kids at booth events and things like that, where we have like, cartoon drawings of AOC and Bernie Sanders and stuff like that, that are stickers that, kids can have. And so we use it for all kinds of projects. Thanks.
Yeah. That's really good. I didn't know about that. Okay. And I'm going to continue going on here. I think this is almost the end. So one of the things you want to do before you start your mail program is make sure that you have the capacity to keep it running. So you will need someone as a copywriter to write your mail. I feel like in a lot of campaigns, this either ends up being if you're not hiring someone to do it, it ends up either being the job of the campaign manager or the job of whoever is in charge of communications. You will need to have a graphic designer as well. And this is going to need to be someone who knows how to use, how to design things that will be printed using ink. When you use a digital printer, you can get a bunch of different colors using, like digital ink, I guess. But when you're using when you're designing mailers that will go out for especially like large universes, it's going to use like it's going to use just ink, which is going to be either black ink, yellow ink, cyan, or magenta, and it gets colors by mixing them together. So you cannot, for example, use what's it called? You cannot, for example, look at like the hexacode thing and say, I want to use like hexacode, blah, 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 whatever long string of numbers for my logo here, because it does not translate. They're two different like coloring systems. So that's one of the things you have to keep in mind. If you have, for example, an industrial college nearby, you can probably go to one of those and like find someone who has some idea of how to design with ink palettes in mind, and you can usually find someone if you have like a good enough like network of people to try to find an art designer. But anyone who is any graphic designer who has experience designing things that are meant to be printed using ink is a good person to try to build capacity with. It's a good idea to have a photographer that is used to taking that knows how to take photos for campaigns, and if not, that's someone you'll want to give a little bit of direction to on how to take photos. So one of the things that's important for photos for mailers is to leave space either to the right or to the left of the person. So if you want to add text, you have an area to do it. So one of the things that's not good is if you have like a close-in photo where the candidate's face is extremely closed in, they're looking directly at the camera, and there's no real space on either side of their head, because it doesn't give you a lot of room to work with pictures. So you usually want someone who knows how to pose the candidate and knows how to pose the candidate and what things will look good in mail. So for example, you want people, when you're taking photos, to be talking with their hands a lot and making hand motions, and to make it look as if they're speaking. So it's also a good idea in terms of quality and control to have people who edit your mailers. So before it goes to print, before it goes out to everyone's mailboxes, make sure people scan the mailer very, very, very carefully, because once it's printed and once it goes out, you cannot get those pieces back. You've already spent the money. If you want to get those sent out, you're going to have to spend, if you want to replace them, you're going to have to spend more money to get them reprinted. So you do not want any errors on any of your mail pieces. I say this because it is very, very easy to have things be overlooked, whether that's a comma in the wrong place or something that is miscapitalized, or a box that isn't correct, or God forbid the wrong return address. All of these things are things that you want to have a process in place for, to make sure that each line and each word and each aspect of your mailer is being checked and is correct before you send it out. Because even if you catch the error later on, the most you can do is have them toss out all the pieces that have not been delivered yet. So how do you create a schedule for your mail? So usually what you want to do is you want to work backwards from your election day. And you also want to take note of any federal holidays or religious holidays that you think are important to take into consideration. So the post office does not run on federal holidays. So if any of your mail pieces are supposed to be dropping on like a Labor Day or like the 4th of July, you have to reschedule them so they do not. So when you're going back, you want to make sure that you are not dropping on consecutive days, because that's usually no good. You want to be leaving at least a few days in between each drop. So usually that is like either like a Tuesday, Friday, or a Monday, Thursday. Monday, Thursday. If you drop, you don't usually see people dropping on like Wednesday and Saturday because it's just kind of an inconvenient thing to send people mail over mail during the weekend. Also, just to put this so you know that now that when you send things through the mail, there is usually like a day or two or like maybe up to 5 days where it's been sent, it's supposed to drop, but it just hasn't reached people's mailboxes yet. You don't really have to worry too much about that until like if it's been like 6 days and you haven't seen your mail showing up, then you have an issue. So one of the things that's important to take into account is scheduling for the production of these mail pieces. So you have to make sure that it is written, the art for the mail piece is designed, and it goes through whatever internal approval process you have, and then goes out the door with enough time to reach people's mailboxes. So if you take into consideration that from the time you send something to your printing house to the time it drops, the smallest amount of time that will take is about 1 week. So normally, if you only have like a 8-piece, 9-piece program, you want to be want to start drafting things about 15 to 18 days before they're sent out. The bigger the program, the earlier you want to start, because the more pieces that you have to take into consideration. So as I said, a lot of it is about scheduling and having something that is very repeatable, that you do not have to change in between each individual mailer. So you want to keep the process going, if just for your own ease. So with that, I think I have come to the end of the introduction to mail. So if there are any other questions that you want to ask me, please go ahead. We have a lot of time.
I had a question. I'm not sure if this is just hop in time or.
I'm going to answer some of these questions that I did not see. I'm going to answer some of these questions I didn't see yet, and then I'll let people go hop in. Okay, so I see one that says, I know my district is not the norm clearly, but if I can only send one, what would you suggest as the pre-election send-off? So are you sending this as a GOTV piece?
So essentially, I mean, New Hampshire is weird, right? We have 400 representatives.
Right.
So my district is very small. And so I'm thinking essentially I'm going to be able to send out one mailer, and I want to make that one mailer the big thing. So yes, I think it would be get out the vote, but also kind of, I don't know, if it's only one, how can I kind of maximize my impact? If you have any tips.
So my clock is going off. I didn't realize that. Let me think. So under normal circumstances, I would say that instead of sending one mail piece out to everybody, it would be better to send to maybe slice your universe size a little bit smaller and send 2 mailers out to maybe a few less people in order to like be able to communicate to all of them. So if you say have a budget of, I don't know, like what, $6,000? If it's a budget of like 5,000 or so, instead of using that money to communicate to these people just one time, because it's very hard to reinforce the message, I would suggest maybe going and taking a look at your universe and seeing, for example, like maybe who your base voter is, and if it's just GOTV mail, seeing if it's people who show up some elections but don't show up other elections, and taking that $5,000 and splitting it into either 2 mailers or 3 mailers instead of just doing the one.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And in that case, I would also just, if it's a GOTV mailing, I would just say, maybe some things about like when the election is, who you are, like your biographical information. Tell them maybe some things about, like I would put like a QR code on there that leads to your state's like Secretary of State website that gives them all the information on where to vote and how to vote. I would maybe put in like just some bullet points about what your platform is, and some like some pictures of you like that are like kind of high quality. Usually I think that's around, it's a couple of millibytes. I think it's usually like, I can't remember the number off my top of my head, but if I look, I can see like there's some pictures have to be a certain size when you send them through the mail so the quality doesn't degrade. But if you have a graphic designer, they should hopefully know that. But yeah, I would say the most important things would be your biographical information, what your platform is, and maybe like one piece about like what your plans are for the district.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Super helpful.
Decide what is good for mailing. Decide what is mail. What do you do? Ground game situation changes mid-cycle. Okay, so this is this is a good question actually. So it will depend. So what you put in your program will depend on your resources. So if you have enough money to conduct a poll, that will be a large part of you deciding what goes into your mailers and what doesn't. If not, I suppose you would have to have a very, very good grasp of your district and what issues people care about, and figure out how to create a central theme around that thing and use each mail piece in your series as as evidence for why you're good at that thing, why your opponent is bad at that thing, and why electing you would be different than electing your opponent. So in terms of that order, that can really depend on what you're trying to accomplish. So I know, for example, if you have the ability to get out early and negatively define your opponent before a lot of people have heard or seen any of the communications, then that is usually a good idea. If, for example, your opponent isn't really communicating much, either through like radio or television, or they're not appearing in your district very often, maybe it's a good idea to just use positive mailers and make sure that as many people know you, know who you are as possible, and not even spend time on your opponent, because if they do not have if they don't have the name ID or the name recognition, there's really no point in spending a bunch of money to negatively define people if no one's going to hear from them. So in terms of changing things as in response to developments on the ground, that usually requires some rapid, some flexibility and some rapid, some quick thinking, because anything can happen. There can be like I know, for example, in some of my races in Chicago, there was a shooting, and that made us have to cancel some gun pieces because they could be seen as too flippant for the tragedy that just happened. So under normal circumstances, I would say that there are better modes of communication for that rapid response stuff than mail. Mail is usually for making sure your platform is known. That being said, if an issue comes up and it aligns with something that you were already trying to do, I would suggest you can rework your mail piece before it goes to print to try to get that in there. Or if you want to change some of the things in your arc because something has become more of an important issue. So for example, when Roe v. Wade came out, if you wanted to change some of your future, some of the pieces you had planned for the future from, say, maybe like, I'm just gonna say public safety and make those into Roe v. Wade pieces, I would definitely suggest that you do that. You still have some ability to work to rework things in mail, but you have to consider the fact that when something happens, it will still take, even if you change everything, get it done, get it approved that very day, it will still take a week from when you send it to your mailer to when people first start to see it. Yeah, it's talking about different groups, like a general setting, Democrats. It's funny that you, so do you recommend doing different mailers targeted at different groups, like a general sending mailer to Democrats with a messaging that they would be more receptive to, and sending different messaging to unaffiliated voters? The short answer to that is yes. The long answer to that is actually something that we do very often. We will send to universes of Democratic voters and independent voters and have two parallel messaging arcs going between them. So for Democratic voters who we know will have like a stronger base support, it might be less persuasion and more positive mail to get people more excited at the beginning. And it might be some more negative mail towards the middle to like get people to feel more pressure to come out and vote. And for independents, in that case, it might be a case where we start with negative mail, almost start with like a brief introduction, and then start with negative mail very quickly after that to define the opponent before the opponent can properly define themselves. Do you set up two different committees to do positive versus negative mail? In my opinion, I don't normally think that's necessary. If it's, when we do it as like a mail consulting firm, we use the same people doing positive negatives as part of the messaging arc. Usually the way I approach it is that if you have something that you want as your central thesis, which is like, say, for example, you live in a city where the mayor pays himself like $300,000 a year. He has hired his brother as the police chief, and he caters to his cousin. He uses his cousin as a caterer and pays them like $10,000 per event, $10,000 per event. and you want to say, for example, the central thesis is the current mayor is corrupt and stealing from the people, stealing from the residents. And if I am elected mayor, I will end like this patronage system. I would maybe approach that as one messaging arc split into a bunch of different pieces. So with each one, you want to prove that you don't have to say it, wouldn't normally say it explicitly that you are the one who's going to end the patronage system. But you want to prove through like your actions and words that you're not corrupt and the other guy is. So you could say something, for example, like, I believe that, and this isn't very good, so I'm coming up with it on the fly, but I believe that government officials shouldn't be hiring their family members for lucrative government contracts, and for like for a couple of mail pieces, and then say, or Mayor so-and-so hired his brother and sister for lucrative contracts. Is that who best represents us? And you can do it in that way, where it's a continuation of one theme through several mail pieces. We are doing a no contrast mailer targeted to T1 and T2 Dems, a contrast mailer targeted to T1 independents, and contrast mailer targeted to T1 Republicans to dissuade them from voting for extremist Republican incumbent. Are you asking for my opinion on that one, or are you asking, or are you just?
I was just kind of chiming in a response to Alexis's question. Like, this is what our campaign is doing.
Yeah. Okay. So I've made my way through all of the written questions. So now people can just jump in and ask questions if they want to.
And I'll also chime in and say this. I know that for some folks, because I think a lot of you put your questions in the chat. If you have additional questions, I'm wondering, Io, if you'd be open with me passing along your email for folks that are here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Very cool.
I'll type it in the chat.
What do you use to kind of track engagement? I mean, you mentioned like some QR codes. I imagine you could track that as people use them. But are there other things like, radio has Nielsen and other things to track how many listeners? Is there anything that you can use to track engagement?
So tracking engagement for mail is a little bit more difficult because unless people have something that they can send back to you attached to it, there's no real way to do it. I mean, I suppose if you really were super interested in tracking engagement, you could have people. You can ask the mail house to essentially create like a serrated portion of the mail piece and have people fill out like almost like if you ever done like a commit to vote form, you can have people do that. And if you want to instruct your volunteers to, oh my God, that is a big beetle. If you want to instruct your volunteers to come and pick that up when they go through canvassing, that's an option. The QR code is usually a good one. And I guess you can, I guess mail is more adjacent to field, and that when you have people go by, you can just ask them if they saw your mail pieces.
I'm wondering if there are any, so I ran for city council last year and actually did pretty well. I only lost by 36 votes. So I felt pretty good about that as a no-name nobody, running against somebody who was a city councilor before. Anyway, the point is that when I sent out the mailer, I got back, we sent out, I want to say it was around 2,500, right around there. And I must have gotten back like 300 of them over the course of like the next 3 or 4 months. I couldn't believe like Christmas, I was still getting them back. And I'm going, so I'm wondering if you have any tips for kind of, I don't know, getting around. I guess that just comes from what list you're coming from. Or,
Yeah.
but maybe there's a way that you can target it. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there if there's any tricks to that.
So let me see. So when you got the mailers back, did they have people's names and addresses on them? Because sometimes when you print mailers out, the machine will take 2 at one time and only stamp 1. So that when when they go out, they might get sent back because there's no address on it.
Nah, we actually hand labeled them. A friend of mine had a label maker. We used I think it was the Working Families Party list. And
so there's a few things that you need to do to prepare a list, which is you have to process it against the U.S. Postal Service's change of address registry, right? Because some people will either move or they won't have their address updated to show where they actually live now. You also have to make sure that no one's deceased, which is usually pretty rare. There's also some instances where people will have, depending on whether maybe if the data wasn't processed correctly when the list was pulled initially, there may be some people who are listed with double addresses. There may be people with addresses that are like out of state, which can happen sometimes. There are a lot of things that can go wrong when you process a list. Usually when you pull a list and have it processed, they'll cut down, like, I think I've usually seen about like 200, 300 names off that list. So yeah, I can actually look at my email really quickly to see what the exact language, because I do it so often that I don't even like think about it so much. I have a template that I use to process. Let me stop share here really quickly. I have a template that I usually use when I send out emails for that. So let me just check really quickly to see if I have.
that's awesome. There's like something like that. I love that.
Yeah, will you be sharing the mailer template that I saw earlier?
The budget?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll share that with you guys. Don't worry about it. Okay, so yeah, so usually you check to see if against the national change of address registry. You check to see if there are any duplicate entries, and you check to see if anyone has moved out of state. So yeah, also it's a good idea to have a couple of people in the address you're mailing to who are friendly with your campaign, who you can call and check in on to see if they have they've received your mail.
I also just dropped in the chat a print collateral resources. The note that's on here is actually from Io when he was talking to the graphic designer that did this. And since y'all are Renew folks, you're welcome to use the print collateral resource, the sample documents, things like that.
Oh, so my computer's slowing down.
Cool. I think I'll do a last call for you for questions, Io, and
So if there's not any more questions, the thing I always just want to emphasize is that the most important thing with mail is planning. It is a much slower mode of communication than radio, than digital, than television. You cannot have an idea and then have it go out there that afternoon. You have to come up with the idea and then concept it, and then think about when people will get it and what information that you want them to have 1 week from now. So as long as you plan ahead and forecast with mail, and you're really conscious of what you're trying to accomplish and what things you want people to see, because again, mail is a visual medium, I think you'll be successful with it.
Awesome. Thank you, Io. I want everyone to give Io a massive round of applause. All good things. Io is part of our cohort, and I want to say personally, as someone who had the privilege of working with Io, I want to say that getting him to do this was very exciting for me because he's a wealth of knowledge. So I encourage you to send an email if you have any questions. We will definitely drop any resources. I will send his email address to y'all as well as this recording. So I want to say, as always, please take excellent care of yourselves. Have a great night. And if you're in any hurricane space, I think all of you are Rhode Island, California, and the Northeast and DC. So take care of yourselves this weekend. Take care. Bye.
See ya.